Thank you, Richard. Good evening, everyone. Richard began by reading from John chapter 1, and I'm going to go back to John chapter 1 with you this evening. I think the festival of Christmas and Easter are so important because, some people say, oh, well, Jesus wasn't born on Christmas Day. Well, okay, we know that. But the fact that we celebrate the fact that God became man is amazing. And the fact that when we come to Christmas, we will always emphasize the truths of what we call the incarnation, when God became man, when the word became flesh, is really wonderful. It won't get lost throughout the year. There's always a refocusing. And that's why it's also wonderful when we celebrate Easter, because then we have a focus on the death and resurrection of Jesus, and everybody in the churches are thinking about it. So I'm a real fan of these two Christian festivals. I'm going to read from John chapter 1 again, and then we're going to dwell on John chapter 1, verse 14. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that's been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it or understood it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning the light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light, he came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. And here we are. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, or made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Now, in John 1, verse 14, it says, the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. And the New Testament, that was written in Greek, New Testament Greek, uses a word for dwelt among us. And that Greek word literally means tabernacled or pitched his tent. So, and the Word was made flesh and tabernacled among us. The Word was made flesh and he pitched his tent among us. And this word is the Greek word that was used in the Greek version of the Old Testament, the Septuagint, for the tabernacle of the Old Testament. And I'm sure you remember the tabernacle. That was the portable sanctuary where God's presence dwelled and manifested among Israel during their wilderness journey. Do you remember? They would carry the tabernacle with them, and every time that God rested and the fire by night or the cloud by day stopped, then the tabernacle would be set up there and sacrifices would take place, and nobody could go into the Holy of Holies where the ark was except the high priest, and only the high priest once a year on the Day of Atonement. And then, of course, that portable sanctuary eventually became a permanent temple under Solomon, was destroyed and then rebuilt again. And so the importance of the tabernacle, the tent, which would later be the temple, is, you see, God is everywhere. God is everywhere. We know that. But he chose in the Old Testament to manifest his presence and his relationship in the tent, the tabernacle, and then in the temple. He chose that there would be a place that he would come and he would meet with his people, and his people could sacrifice, bring praise to him, have their sins forgiven, and he would manifest himself to them. And even today, we know, don't we, that God is everywhere. Of course he is. But he's not manifesting himself or showing himself. That's what manifestation means. He's not showing himself everywhere, is he? Sometimes he will show himself. Sometimes he will manifest his presence. Sometimes in a meeting, or perhaps where you are in a personal devotion, you will feel his presence emotionally or even physically. But in the Old Testament, this was the place where he chose to regularly meet with his people. Of course, he would manifest himself in different places at different times. Elijah found him when he came out of the cave in the stillness. But this was the point. Where was God? If you wanted to meet with God, if you wanted to get close to God, then how would you do it? Well, you'd go to the tabernacle, you'd go to the temple, and there in the Holy of Holies, where the high priest could only go once, that was to show where his presence was. So this is really powerful, that Jesus, the Word, was made flesh and tabernacled among us. God's presence had once again come to dwell among his people, but not in a temple made of stone, not in a temple made of cloth, the portable tabernacle, but God had come to tabernacle, to pitch his tent in Jesus of Nazareth. The Word, the second person of the Trinity, that we sometimes see manifested in the Old Testament as the angel of the Lord, now comes and becomes human, incarnate. God now manifests or dwells in human form. He becomes human, not just in a human form, but becomes human. He is now fully God, the fullness of God. Colossians tells us, dwelt bodily in Jesus, the fullness of God and the fullness of humanity, the fullness of man, at one in one person, Jesus, fully God, fully man. And so now, when you wanted to get close to Jesus, when you want to get close to God's presence, forget the temple. In fact, the temple was going to get destroyed in AD 70, according to Jesus's prophecy. The temple was over. The temple was finished. It was just a symbol and a prophetic pointer and a temporary place so that people would understand the magnificence of the temple that would be Jesus's body, Jesus. So the Word tabernacled amongst us, has come to us. God has come to us intimately, not now in the Holy of Holies in a tent or a temple, but God has come to us personally in the tent, the tabernacle of a human body. The temple was now Jesus. And we'll see this later on in John's Gospel. Jesus will talk about the temple and talk about how God could, he said, you've taken 40 years to build this temple, but this temple will be destroyed, and in 3 days I will raise it up. And they thought he was talking about the physical temple, but he used two words. When he said, you spent all these years, 40 years or whatever, however many years it was, building this physical temple, he used the word hieron, which is the Greek for the whole temple, the temple courts, everything. So, but then he said, but this neos, will be raised in 3 days. And Naos means the Holy of Holies. So he was basically saying this temple complex that taken you all this time to make, but this Holy of Holies, meaning himself, will be rebuilt in 3 days, if you like. It'll be raised in 3 days. So there, he is literally telling people that he is the temple where God dwells. God is no longer distant, but God has made himself present in people's lives through Jesus. You can't go to any religion and find God and know his presence, know his be intimate. You can't do it. It's Jesus, God dwelling with his people permanently. That's why we're called Emmanuel. Emmanuel, God with us. They will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. So God with us is Jesus, and that's why no wonder everybody wanted to touch him and be with him and to hear him, because he was the fullness of God. But of course, it's interesting, isn't it, in the thing that we read, that people didn't recognize that. Isn't it interesting? They didn't recognize it. There it was, the Holy of Holies is now in bodily form, fully God, fully man, the Holy of Holies, God, Emmanuel, dwelt with us. But many people that spoke to him, saw him, didn't recognize that this was the fact. They just thought he was, a gifted teacher, charismatic leader, but they didn't recognize that this was the Holy of Holies. That to see Jesus is more powerful than when the high priest, and only the high priest, could go in to the Holy of Holies only once a year. Even only one person once a year could go into the Holy of Holies, which represented the presence of God. But now the presence of God was walking around, talking, healing, teaching, touching. Amazing. The tabernacle, the Holy of Holies, is now in bodily form. And, Hebrews talks about how the earthly tabernacle and temple was a figure of heavenly realities, and that we now when Jesus ascended, it was important because when Jesus was on earth for his 33 years or so, then if you wanted to get to the Holy of Holies, you had to get into the presence of Jesus. I mean, that's where it was. It was in Jesus. So that would mean there was a sort of limitation on those, and the crowds all pressed, didn't they? Thousands of them to touch him, but not everybody could touch him. Not everybody could talk to him. Not everybody could hear him, because he was physically in bodily form. But when he was raised from the dead, he was glorified, taken to heaven, and made a way to the Father's throne. We can boldly approach his throne. It's a better covenant. And then he sent his Holy Spirit so that all of us can be with Jesus every moment of the day. He's just one prayer away. You can talk to him right now. The Holy Spirit is here. The Holy Spirit has brought Jesus to us. He will take of me and bring to you. He will speak of me. He will remind you of things. He will take of me. So the Holy Spirit carries Jesus to us, and he's not in his, and he's wherever we are. And faith gives us access to the presence of Jesus through the Holy Spirit. And so this is an amazing thing that Jesus says, better that I'll go away from you, better that I will leave you, because there's only one of me in bodily form. But when I leave you, I'll send the Holy Spirit, and he will bring my presence, my words, my intimacy, my friendship, my fellowship. He will bring it to all that believe, wherever they are, whatever they're doing, in whatever situation they find themselves, wherever they are geographically. Every single believer can enter in to the Holy of Holies relationally with God through the Holy Spirit by simply believing. And that's a wonderful thing. So that's a very powerful thing, isn't it? That now church buildings are great for congregations and stuff, but now you find God in the hearts of people. You find God in relationship with people. The Holy of Holies is everywhere a believer is. And so this Christmas time, when we focus on the Word becoming flesh, and we focus on God becoming man, and we focus on the tabernacle, the naos, the Holy of Holies, walking around, healing and preaching, touching and caring, and a baby growing to be a man, and we think of all these things. And now, seated at the right hand of heaven, he is now totally released to across the world, and just simple faith in his blood and resurrection, and you have access to him and his holiness and everything. It's a wonderful thing, Christmas. It's a wonderful thing what God did. Not only did he come to be with us, Emmanuel, but he also came to die for us and rise again, so that we would be clean enough in his blood to be able to stand in his presence and to access his presence at any time we desire, no matter what situation we find ourselves in. Very close to him, very holy, or backslidden. He's just one penitent prayer away. So that's what I wanted to share about Christmas today. Thank you, Richard.